all well off right now if he wanted to. We could have been rich long ago if he'd ever really felt as he ought to about his family." "What? Why, how could—" "You know how as well as I do," Mrs. Adams said, crossly. "I guess you haven't forgotten how he treated me about it the Sunday before he got sick." She went on with her work, putting into it a sudden violence inspired by the recollection; but Alice, enlightened, gave utterance to a laugh of lugubrious derision. "Oh, the glue factory again!" she cried. "How silly!" And she renewed her laughter. So often do the great projects of parents appear ignominious to their children. Mrs. Adams's conception of a glue factory as a fairy godmother of this family was an absurd old story which Alice had never taken seriously. She remembered that when she was about 15 her mother began now and then to say something to Adams about a glue factory, rather timidly and as a vague suggestion, but never without irritating him. Then, for years, the preposterous subject had not been mentioned, possibly because of some explosion on the part of Adams when his daughter had not been present. But during the last year Mrs. Adams had quietly gone back to these old hints, reviving them at intervals and also reviving her husband's irritation. Alice's bored impression was that her mother wanted him to found or buy or do something or other about a glue factory, and that he considered the proposal so impracticable as to be insulting. The parental conversations took place when neither Alice nor Walter was at hand, but sometimes Alice had come in upon the conclusion of one, to find her father in a shouting mood, and shocking the air behind him with profane monosyllables as he departed. Mrs. Adams would be left quiet and troubled, and when Alice, sympathizing with the goaded man, inquired of her mother why these tiresome bickerings had been renewed, she always got the brooding and cryptic answer, "He could do it if he wanted to." Alice failed to comprehend the desirability of a glue factory. To her mind, a father engaged in a glue factory lacked impressiveness, had no advantage over a father employed by Lamb and Company, and she supposed that Adams knew better than her mother whether such an enterprise would be profitable or not. Emphatically, he thought it would not, for she had heard him shouting at the end of one of those painful interviews, "You can keep up your dang talk till you die and I die, but I'll never make one God's cent that way." There had been a culmination. Returning from church on the Sunday preceding the collapse with which Adams's illness had begun, Alice found her mother downstairs, weeping and intimidated, while her father's stamping footsteps were loudly audible as he strode up and down his room overhead. So were his endless repetitions of invective loudly audible. "That woman! Oh, that woman! Oh, that dang woman!" Mrs. Adams admitted to her daughter that it was the old glue factory, and that her husband's wildness had frightened her into a solemn promise never to mention the subject again so long as she had breath. Alice laughed. The glue factory idea was not only a bore, but ridiculous, and her mother's evident seriousness about it one of these inexplicable vagaries we sometimes discover in the people we know best. But this Sunday rampage appeared to be the end of it, and when Adams came down to dinner an hour later he was unusually cheerful. Alice was glad he had gone wild enough to settle the glue factory once and for all, and she had ceased to think of the episode long before Friday of that week, when Adams was brought home in the middle of the afternoon by his old employer, the great J. A. Lamb, in the latter's car. During the long illness the glue factory was completely forgotten, by Alice at least, and her laugh was rueful as well as derisive now, in the kitchen, when she realized that her mother's mind again dwelt upon this abandoned nuisance. "I thought you'd got over all that nonsense, Mama," she said. Mrs. Adams smiled pathetically. "Of course you think it's nonsense, dearie. Young people think everything's nonsense that they don't know anything about." "Good gracious!" Alice cried. "I should think I used to hear enough about that horrible old glue factory to know something about it." "No," her mother returned patiently. "You've never heard anything about it at all." "I haven't?" "No. Your father and I didn't discuss it before you children. All you ever heard was when he'd get in such a rage after we'd been speaking of it that he couldn't control himself when you came in. Wasn't I always quiet? Did I ever go on talking about it?" "No, perhaps not. But you're talking about it now, Mama, after you promised never to mention it again." "I promised not to mention it to your father," said Mrs. Adams gently. "I haven't mentioned it to him, have I?" "Ah, but if you mention it to me, I'm afraid you will mention it to him. You always do speak of things that you have on your mind, and you might get Papa all stirred up again about—" Alice paused, a light of divination flickering in her eyes. "Oh!" she cried. "I see." "What do you see?" "You have been at him about it." "Not one single word." "No!" Alice cried. "Not a word, but that's what you've meant all along." You haven't spoken the words to him, but all this urging him to change, to find something better to go into, it's all been about nothing on earth but your foolish old glue factory that you know upsets him, and you gave your solemn word never to speak to him about it again. You didn't say it, but you meant it, and he knows that's what you meant. Oh, Mama!" Mrs. Adams, with her hands still automatically at work in the flooded dishpan, turned to face her daughter. "Alice," she said, tremulously, "what do I ask for myself?" "What?" "I say, what do I ask for myself? Do you suppose I want anything? Don't you know I'd be perfectly content on your father's present income if I were the only person to be considered? What do I care about any pleasure for myself? I'd be willing never to have a maid again. I don't mind doing the work. If we didn't have any children, I'd be glad to do your father's cooking and housework, and the washing and ironing too, for the rest of my life. I wouldn't care. I'm a poor cook and a poor housekeeper. I don't do anything well, but it would be good enough for just him and me. I wouldn't ever utter one word of "Oh, goodness!" Alice lamented. "What is it all about?" "It's about this," said Mrs. Adams, swallowing. "You and Walter are a new generation, and you ought to have the same as the rest of the new generation get. Poor Walter, asking you to go to the movies and a Chinese restaurant, the best he had to offer. Don't you suppose I see how the poor boy is deteriorating? Don't you suppose I know what you have to go through, Alice? And when I think of that man upstairs—" The agitated voice grew louder. "When I think of him and know that nothing in this world but his stubbornness keeps my children from having all they want and what they ought to have, do you suppose I'm going to hold myself bound to keep to the absolute letter of a silly promise he got from me by behaving like a crazy man? I can't. I can't do it. No mother could sit by and see him lock up a horn of plenty like that in his closet when the children were starving." "Oh, goodness, goodness me!" Alice protested. "We aren't precisely starving, are we?" Mrs. Adams began to weep. "It's just the same. Didn't I see how flushed and pretty you looked this afternoon after you'd been walking with this young man that's come here? Do you suppose he would look at a girl like Mildred Palmer if you had what you ought to have? Do you suppose he'd be going into business with her father if your father— Good heavens, Mama, you're worse than Walter. I just barely know the man. Don't be absurd." "Yes, I'm always absurd," Mrs. Adams moaned. "All I can do is cry while your father sits upstairs and his horn of plenty—" But Alice interrupted with a peal of desperate laughter. "Oh, that horn of plenty! Do come down to earth, Mama. How can you call a glue factory that doesn't exist except in your mind a horn of plenty? Do let's be a little rational." "It could be a horn of plenty," the tearful Mrs. Adams insisted. "It could. You don't understand a thing about it." "Well, I'm willing," Alice said, with tired skepticism. "Make me understand, then. Where did you ever get the idea?" Mrs. Adams withdrew her hands from the water, dried them on a towel, and then wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "Your father could make a fortune if he wanted to," she said, quietly. "At least, I don't say a fortune, but anyhow a great deal more than he does make. Yes, I've heard that before, Mama, and you think he could make it out of a glue factory. What I'm asking is, how?" "How? Why, by making glue and selling it. Don't you know how bad most glue is when you try to mend anything? A good glue is one of the rarest things there is, and it would just sell itself once it got started. Well, your father knows how to make as good a glue as there is in the world." Alice was not interested. "What of it? I suppose probably anybody could make it if they wanted to." "I said you didn't know anything about it. Nobody else could make it. Your father knows a formula for making it." "What of that?" "It's a secret formula. It isn't even written down on paper. It's worth any amount of money." "Any amount?" Alice said, remaining incredulous. "Why hasn't Papa sold it, then?" "Just because he's too stubborn to do anything with it at all." "How did Papa get it?" "He got it before you were born, just after we were married. I didn't think much about it then. It wasn't till you were growing up and I saw how much we needed money that I—" "Yes, but how did Papa get it?" Alice began to feel a little more curious about this possible buried treasure. "Did he invent it?" "Partly," Mrs. Adams said, looking somewhat preoccupied. "He and another man invented it." "Then maybe the other man— he's dead. Then his family?" "I don't think he left any family," Mrs. Adams said. "Anyhow, it belongs to your father. At least, it belongs to him as much as it does to anyone else. He's got an absolutely perfect right to do anything he wants to do with it, and it would make us all comfortable if he would do what I want him to, and he knows it would, too." Alice shook her head pityingly. "Poor Mama," she said. "Of course he knows it wouldn't do anything of the kind, or else he'd have done it long ago." "He would, you say?" her mother cried. "That only shows how little you know him." "Poor mama!" Alice said again.